Believe me, there are many video topics that we can go over when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, from the fact that they have lost again against another bad team, to the head coach, Sheldon Keefe, if he's going to get fired. Is he deserving of getting fired? Is him getting fired even going to change anything? I'm recording this audio at 2:48 a.m. in the morning. It's Halloween, by the way, so happy Halloween. Michael Myers, please stay away. It's October 31st, so there hasn't been any Toronto Maple Leafs moves or madness or trades or whatever. At the time of me recording this audio, they had just come off of losing the game against Anaheim in overtime. But when it comes to the storylines, there are many going on with this team. Don't get me wrong, I think Steve Dangle's video from last night, the One Taker LFR season, whatever the heck he is on, episode 9 or 10, something like that. It's been a very short amount of time into the season, and already people like Steve Dangle, people all over social media, Leafs fans, NHL fans, they're all clamoring about how bad this Maple Leafs team can play. Not saying how bad they are. We know that they're talented. But when it comes to how poorly they're capable of executing out there, that really is the biggest storyline that I think has taken over. But I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into one of the more character-driven elements to this Toronto team. Let's talk today about Mitch Marner. Because when it comes to Marner, the guy is a point per game on the season. He's got 9 points in 10 games. He's on pace for 73 points, which actually would be somewhat of a disappointment in terms of the overall point production he has had in the past few years. I mean, he had 97 points last year in 72 games. The year before that, back-to-back 67-point years in 50-ish games each time, and then another 90-point season back in 2018-19. Mitch Marner is a 100-point pace caliber player. That he is, and we're all aware of that. This season, he's kind of below that shade, but we all kind of expect that Marner is probably going to be able to get himself a ton of points heading into the next few games here. But when it comes to what had happened yesterday for Toronto against Anaheim, I really wanted to dive into just some of the theatrics that we had seen. Because Mitch Marner was partially, directly, let's say, responsible for 2 goals that Anaheim scored when the game was 3-2 Toronto. It was actually 3-1 Toronto for a period, but it became 3-2. Sheldon Keefe took a timeout, and both of the goals that had been scored by the Ducks had been off of turnovers given directly to Anaheim by Mr. Mitch Marner himself. He done goofed, and he did it twice. You could see during the timeout that Sheldon Keefe calls when they're up 1 with a few minutes left in the third period against the worst team in the NHL. Yeah, by the way, we didn't mention that yet. Anaheim was at the bottom of the league when they beat Toronto. You could see Sheldon Keefe kind of saying both those goals, and he's kind of pointing at Mitch Marner on the bench while he's saying both goals. So you could kind of tell that Mitch was getting put on the spotlight by his coach in front of his team during a timeout. The TV cameras are zoomed in closely, and because Toronto is Toronto, everybody's pointing it out saying, hey, look at him, he's calling out Marner. Ooh, that's crazy. And then, during the TV timeout, you could see there's some replay footage of what happened on the Leafs bench during the timeout, and Marner ends up taking a stick. He goes into the hallway, and he smashes that stick up. The guy has a tantrum. This was called out by Steve on his LFR. This was called out by many other people on social media that I had seen yesterday as well. Just search up Marner tantrum and you'll find some tangible results of people discussing this event in the game last night. And when it comes to this in general, when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs and their lack of drive, their lack of commitment to winning, their attitude. You know, it's not like they have attitude problems per se, but it's the lack of any sort of attitude that makes this feel a lot more like a skeleton, insisting that it's a real human being rather than being an actual thriving person. It's like the Toronto Maple Leafs pretend that they're a talented team that can score a lot of points and they can do all these things and they can make fancy goals happen and they can get 100 points on the year. Some of these guys are capable of doing that. But when push comes to shove, when the going really gets tough, when you play off against teams that are at the bottom of the standings, teams that you're supposed to be able to win against, they end up blowing it. And for some reason, Toronto is the one team that exhibits that sort of pattern night in and night out. Heck, it's been like this for like a decade, something like that. So for Mitch Marner, I wanted to bring him up specifically because there's been a lot of conversation about change in Toronto, whether or not that's the coach getting fired, whether that's Kerfoot getting moved, Justin Hall getting traded, somebody else coming back on the right side defense. Do they trade for another goalie? What else do they do? When it comes to the guys at the top of the food chain in terms of salary cap, Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander, you could talk about Nylander too, there's an entire conversation to go on about him. I kind of wanted to bring up the idea of Marner, because Marner's making $10.9 million a season, he's on the books until 2025, he is a talented player that can actually produce a lot of offense, and for the most part he's good defensively, it's just, last night we had seen kind of the worst out of him, on and off the ice mind you. And the reason I say it like that is because when Marner goes out there and he puts up 90-point seasons, the postseason has been a pretty tough go for Marner. Not last year, he had 8 points in 7 games against Tampa Bay, but in prior seasons you had seen him throw the puck over the glass in dire moments of the game, not really producing all too much, and it's been a pretty big conversation point year in and year out of Marner not showing up in the playoffs. And now you have this crap of him throwing temper tantrums and getting benched by Sheldon Keefe, ultimately to get played at the end of the game and in overtime, only to just lose in the end. There are so many conflicting, let's just say, authoritative viewpoints here. Okay, if you're going to bench Marner for having a tantrum, don't play him at the end of the game. Don't play him in overtime. If you're going to bench him, bench the guy. Why is the guy having a temper tantrum in a game against the worst placed team in the league? You're Toronto. You're one of the better teams last year, and you're supposed to be one of the better teams this year. If Sheldon Keefe gets fired, do the attitudes of guys like Marner and all that change? Is it guaranteed that those issues of work ethic and commitment and drive to win all go away if Sheldon Keefe gets fired? Mike Babcock was kind of the guy in charge of this team for a while, and we saw a lot of the same traits under him. What really is the problem here? If you want to talk about trading anybody, I don't think Matthews is going to get traded, nor is the captain John Tavares going to get traded either. Marner is the only one whose name has been tossed into this conversation of fans blowing their heads off about him for so long now that it comes up like a yearly, maybe a half-yearly, semi-yearly, tradition at this point. Oh, Marner is this, Marner is that. They should just trade Marner already, because at least if he's on another team, he can still score his points, but if he's on a team that has other superstar caliber players, he's not going to be the guy that's needing to be relied upon to the extent that he is in Toronto, or he is not the guy that is being hounded on by the media, and they get at his soul by asking him tough questions and asking him about getting benched and all that stuff after. He needs to go to a team where they're going to be easier on him. Yeah, that's the plan. I don't know. It's really difficult to talk about, and I don't know if I did a good job discussing it in the way that I have. I really think that I just kind of rambled on and just ended up saying things for 8 minutes, so I think I might have to go now because, yeah, this video kind of sucked. But if you want to talk to me in the comments, though, go ahead and do that. What are your thoughts on Mitch Marner, the tantrum that he threw yesterday, the breaking of the stick in the hallway, and coming back out, getting benched because of that, only to play in the overtime, only to lose in the overtime, get denied by John Gibson in the overtime, point blank with a very nice desperado, sprawling save there made by the Anaheim goaltender. Thoughts in the comments about Marner, the Maple Leafs, Sheldon Keefe, who stays, who goes, whatever. This video is going to be uploaded at maybe 12 p.m. PST, so we'll see what happens if there's actually any trades or firings or whatever. If there isn't any, then okay, this video will be up with no other comments attached to it, but if there is any sort of move that is made, then we'll probably follow that up sometime. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about Mitch Marner, the Maple Leafs, Sheldon Keefe, etc. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj Rolls 99, and bye.